got some, I guess they stopped over the fellowship hall, they went in that door. More people are coming over now, so. But it is time to get started. And we're glad to have Austin with us this morning. Y'all pretty much introduced yourselves.
Right here.
And Austin, that's my daughter Carol over here.
Yeah.
Hey.
And then there's Kristen coming in. So people are coming in. We'll go ahead and get going, and let's pray before we get started. Father, we just want to give you thanks for another Lord's Day. You've blessed us with a beautiful day. We were able to see your creation as we were driving into church this morning. And Lord, you're just so good to us in so many ways. Lord, this world's full of people that need to know Jesus, and even right here in our own area, there are lots of people that need to know Jesus. So as we think about our missions today, the number of mission points we have, different parts of the world we're in, we just pray for each of them and their efforts to reach the lost for Christ. And that's especially true with King Pitt. And we're thankful for Austin, and we're thankful he's with us today. Just be with him as he speaks to us today. These things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, and just before I turn it over to Austin, on this table over here, you'll find a display of the mission points that we support. And what you'll find their logo, their address, their mission statement. But if you want to know a little bit about the missions that we support, that's what's on this table over here. Okay, Austin, turn it over to you.
What I don't see over here is Kentucky Christian University. I want to see Johnson. You guys know Johnson University. There's so many Johnson people in the area, and Mid-Atlantic, but there's no Kentucky Christian University, which is where I went to school. It's actually a funny thing. So my youth minister, actually I believe, so I grew up going to County Line, where Dean Ashby and Tim Maness are, and then we started going to Cornerstone in Chatham, probably when I was in middle school, and Bob Paddock, who was there, and then Brian Chadwick, who was the youth minister at the time, they're both from Johnson. So all four of them have gone to Johnson, and in my teen years when I decided that I was going to go to Kentucky Christian University, yeah, I don't know how I made that mistake. It seemed like everybody was pointing in one direction, either Mid-Atlantic or Johnson. But I brought my reference letter to my youth minister, and it was right before we had class one night for youth group, and I handed it to him. It was my senior year. I handed it to him, and he opened it up, and he read Kentucky Christian University and just threw it in the trash. And it was a joke, obviously. He asked me then, why do I want to go there? And I told him, I was wanting to go into youth ministry, which I believe we had already had some conversations about that. But what I'd like to do this morning is kind of introduce myself, talk a little bit about my ministry background, talk about Camp Pitt, which is the ministry that I'm with currently, and talk about some of the challenges that we face as a camp. Not necessarily bad challenges, more or less just challenges that we face in the world in general, and how Camp Pitt is working to meet those challenges. So, well, first off, I've already met a couple of you, and some of you know me. My name is Austin Roach. I grew up in Chatham, Virginia. That's where pretty much my whole family is from this area, from the Cowens area, from Gretna, from Chatham. My grandmother, Janet Reynolds, a lot of people know her because a lot of people need their taxes done. She owns the tax office out on 57 in Cowens, so that's my grandmother, Janet Reynolds, and then my grandparents in Gretna. Some people know them, maybe not in the Lynchburg area, but Ann and Larry Roach. And so pretty much I really don't know how far back my family heritage goes, but little fun fact for me, I'm not sure how many people in here remember the old Camp Pitt. Ray remembers, right? The old Camp Pitt was founded by really a lot of the area churches, but it started with the BBS at Sheba, correct? Is that right? I believe it did, at least from what I remember reading back in some of the documents that I found, and just some of what I know myself. But what's funny about this is I grew up farming with my grandpa, Larry, in the same area that Camp Pitt originally started. I've always found that was interesting, and I didn't know it for the longest time. And so Walter Coles, who owns most of the property right there, that was the old camp, that's who my grandfather farmed for. And so I grew up fishing the old pond. I grew up just kind of hanging out there, farming cattle or whatever else, and I never knew that was the old Camp Pitt until probably I was at least 14 years old. So that was just very interesting. I grew up going to Camp Pitt. Started as a camper, then worked my way up as a JC. You got a JC back there. You just smile. You know, like, woo. Okay, that's okay. Shows how exciting Camp Pitt is. No, I grew up going to Camp Pitt as a camper, and then as a junior counselor, we believe that it's important at Camp Pitt, especially in just our local churches, to train up another generation to be Christian leaders in the church. And so it's important for us at Camp Pitt to make sure that we have not just adult counselors, but also junior counselors to make sure that we're training up that next generation. So I was a junior counselor, and then through that, I had a lot of people pouring into me, telling me, hey, Austin, you really should consider ministry. And I thought, you know what, I think that I might. There were some things that were going on in my life, people pouring into me, that really made an impact. And so I decided that I was going to go into ministry at that point. But it was a significant night. I was at a high school week, which was for my age group. I was a junior in high school. It was a Thursday night, and if you've ever been to Camp Pitt on a Thursday night, it's kind of an emotional night, because especially if you're middle school, high school, because you've made all these friends this week, and tomorrow on Friday is the last day. We're going home. And so usually, and then all the sermons or all the messages and lessons have kind of led up to this last lesson on Thursday night, which is, you know, whoever's speaking is just going to bring it home, and usually it's very convicting. And so that last night that I was there at Camp Pitt, my junior year of high school, the speaker was the dean for that week of camp. He talked about a bucket list that we all have as Christians, something that maybe God is calling us to accomplish, something that you want to accomplish in your life. And for me, the entire week as we were talking about that subject, I was just like, you know, I'd already had people talking to me about going into ministry, and at that point, I was just like, that's something I'm going to put on my bucket list. I want to go into full-time ministry, and I want to minister to youth. I had a passion for youth ministry in some form or fashion. And so, so that night, they kind of did a calling segment. They said, if you have something on your bucket list that you want to commit to tonight, we're going to ask you to come forward and commit to that. And so I did. I came up, I committed to that. I said that this is what I was going to do. As we went back to our seats, everything started to come to a close, and they wanted us to take something home with us to remind of the commitment that we've made. And so that night, it was a railroad nail that I still carry with me to this day. I love taking this places. I love talking about this railroad nail because this is where I decided to follow Jesus at a next level. It was one of those moments in my life where I stepped out of my comfort zone to do something that, honestly, I didn't know what that life was going to look like, but I knew that I was going to be answering that call to follow Jesus and to be in ministry. And so at that moment, I decided I was going to go to youth ministry. I went to Kentucky Christian University and studied youth ministry there. After that, I was a youth minister for about 4.5 years at Bridges Christian Church in Russell, Kentucky. So I've spent probably 8 to 9 years in Kentucky, and then I just moved back a year ago. Youth ministry is challenging. I'm glad that I can be a part of the camp ministry. Camp ministry and youth ministry, camp ministry is like youth ministry. I just do a whole lot more mowing now, right? There's just a lot of grass to mow, a lot of maintenance, but it is another form of youth ministry, and I love the camp ministry and what it's done for me. Now I can carry that over and hopefully see the impact for others. And so, so as a youth minister, coming from a youth ministry perspective, I think that camp ministry will hopefully look different for us in the future because I have a little bit of a different perspective. I see a lot of what challenges the youth in not just America, but just the world in general face currently. And how can we use the camp environment to help our kids in their walk with Jesus currently, and then how to strengthen their relationship with Jesus for the future. And so that's what I'm passionate about. Let me back up a little bit and talk about camp this summer. So before camp started this summer, everyone knows this was 2021. We did not want it to be another COVID year, but it was. So we're still struggling with COVID and COVID numbers in our communities, in our area, in our region of Virginia, and around the world. And so we really didn't know what camp was going to look like going into the season in 2020. The board, Scott at the time decided not to have camp. And then going into our 2021 season, we made a huge effort to make sure the camp was open, but we really didn't know what that was going to look like due to COVID. And so we set some goals. A couple of our goals were we wanted to have over 200 campers, which in a COVID year, I thought was a pretty good goal. We really didn't know what to expect, but we knew we wanted at least 200 campers. We did not want to dip into our savings. That was another big thing. We did not want this to be a year where we had to dive into our savings, and so we tried to be as careful as we could on our finances. We wanted kids to be saved. We wanted kids to come to know Jesus. And so just kind of recap. It's good to set goals because you can look back and say, what did we accomplish? We had 214 registrations this year, which was awesome. 48 of which are not connected to any of our local churches. We did not dip into our savings this year. We did go into the red about $2,000, but that $2,000 was stuff that was out-of-date items that we had. So, for example, the camp did not have a laptop this year for me to operate on. I was using my personal one, and then that crashed, and so we had to have a laptop and then an AED. AEDs are important because if someone has a heart attack in camp, we need an AED. CPR will go a long ways, but if you have an AED there. So really our $2,000 in the red was only because of essentially those two items. And so we did well with our finances this summer, and then 7 kids gave their life to Christ and were baptized through the camp ministry. 5 of which happened at camp, which was just an awesome thing. So we accomplished a lot of our goals at Camp Pitt this summer, and that was just really exciting. So I mentioned that camp has played a huge part in my life. Whenever I went to camp, it was a place where I could retreat from the world, get away from distractions, get away from peer pressures or social pressures, and focus in on Jesus. And it was a place where I was encouraged. A lot of Christians came up to me, put their arm around me, encouraged me in my walk with Jesus. And then it was a place where when I left, I felt like I had a plan to either continue in my relationship with Jesus in some way, form, or fashion, or just really take on the world. And so it's just a place where you are strengthened, and that is what I would like camp to be for other people. When something truly impacts you, you want others to experience it, right? How many of you have ever been to a men's conference, a women's conference, or a church conference, right? And you've heard a speaker that was it blew your mind. You thought it was the greatest thing ever, and then you come back and you try to explain it to someone, and you're just like, Ray, this guy, he said this, and he said that, and Ray's sitting there like, okay, wow, yeah, okay, yeah, that's great. And yeah, you may reflect some of how good that speaker was, or how great that seminar was, or the conference, but you're really not going to do it justice, right? Unless the person actually gets to experience it. Experience the conference, experience the thing themselves. And so I really want Camp Pitt to be, for others, what it was for me. I can do a lot by saying Camp Pitt is this, Camp Pitt is that. This is what we do here. I can show videos. But I'm never going to be able to do it justice unless people come to participate, right? And until people come to experience something for themselves. Camp Pitt has a very unique environment that I actually think our world today desperately needs, and I'll explain why. I mentioned Camp Pitt. For me, it was a place where I could retreat. I'm going to throw a couple things out at you. A lot of you parents, a lot of you may already know this. Some of you probably know this just out of assumption. Some of you may have even been reading this about the challenges a lot of our teenagers face in today's world. I'm not a huge fan of social media. There's been actually 2 social media apps that I've deleted within the last year. There's been a recent study done. Actually, I've seen 2 studies from this. One study from Barna Group that came out on the effects of Instagram. If you don't know what Instagram is, it's a social media platform where essentially you can post videos or photos. And other people can see it. If you are essentially following a certain person, you can see what they're posting. And you can also, you have an area on that social media platform where you can just scroll and find new people or people who have a lot of views on videos or photos. You can just look and scroll through different photos, videos, and find new people, new sites, maybe businesses, just, the world, essentially, on the social media platform. And so there's a new study done by Barna Group that talks about the effects of Instagram to girls under the age of 13 years old and how it connects to depression. The reason being, the primary reason being, is because when they open their social media app, Instagram, they instantly start viewing other women or other scenarios where someone has more than they do, or someone or a person is more beautiful than they are. That's what they're seeing, and that's what they're perceiving as they are scrolling or looking through the app. And so Instagram actually helped in this study. They had a questionnaire on their app. Whenever a person didn't necessarily have to be a girl, but whenever a person was scrolling through Instagram for more than 3 to 5 minutes, what they would do is at the start of opening the Instagram app, they would have a quick questionnaire. How are you feeling? Do you feel, or do you feel beautiful right now? Do you feel valuable right now? Just some of those kind of questions, general questions. And then about 5 to 10 minutes in, they would re-ask those questions and then be almost the exact opposite. I don't feel valued. I don't feel beautiful. Yes, I feel a little depressed. And so those are some of the effects of social media that we're seeing. And honestly, it really doesn't surprise me. It's almost like these places that do these studies are finally catching up to what we've kind of known. You get on social media and you kind of compare yourself to what other people have or what they look like. It's really a toxic environment, right? And the same thing goes for a lot of other social media platforms. And so all of that to say, that is just a snapshot or a little bit of a taste of what a lot of teenagers, a lot of kids are going through or involved in. TikTok's another famous one. That actually reaches, you see different age groups using different things, but TikTok is another one. Some kids don't feel like that they are funny enough because they didn't get enough people viewing their videos. Therefore, their self-value drops. You guys get what I'm saying here? So when we live in a We live in a screenager world. It's kind of a silly term, but it's accurate, a screenager. I am 27. I was born in 1994. I remember when Nextel came out with their phone, and my parents loved it. And I don't know if you guys, I'm just thinking about the oldest phone that I remember, which was Nextel. Nextel is just a flip open phone. From there on, I really don't remember a Bluetooth phone until, or a BlackBerry, excuse me, not Bluetooth, BlackBerry phone until maybe I was 10 or 12, maybe. And then from there on, it just grew and got more advanced. So I'm right at that age where I'm kind of a foot in on the screenagers and kind of a foot out a little bit. But all the kids now that were born from 2005 on, they're all screenagers. They've never had a moment in their life where they haven't been used to some form or fashion of a screen in a mobile device, or mobile phone, or an iPad or pad, or a TV of some sort. In fact, I've got I have one niece, 3 nephews, okay? They are ages infant, 1, 2, and 3. No. Infant, 1, 2, and 4. There we go. And I think 3 out of the 4, which is ages 1, 2, and 4, have pads. Can you believe that? I mean, like I've talked to my brother and sister-in-law about it. When you have 4 kids, because it's all from the same family, when you have 4 kids and they're that close together, it's your babysitter. That's what we're talking about, right? It is the babysitter. It's the best babysitter, but it is priming and nurturing the kids that is the first thing that they start to get used to or look at. Now, I'm not a parent. I don't know what it's like trying to raise a bunch of kids, and that availability can be a good thing, but at the same time, where will that lead in the future? But that's just the kind of the world that we live in. So what is Camp Pitt doing? Well, again, we are a place where you come to retreat, right? And so coming into camp, I had so many people ask me, what are you going to do about the phones? Isn't that the funniest thing? Like, why is that the first question that people ask me? What are you going to do about the phones? Are kids going to be allowed to have phones now? I think a lot of people thought, well, he's a younger camp manager. He's probably going to want more phones. No, not at all. If you can't go 5 days without your phone, something's wrong. And most can't. Most can't, right? Camp Pitt's going to remain to be a place where phones probably aren't going to be. In fact, I can count probably on one hand several parents that came up to me this summer and said, my kid is here because COVID has kept them on their Xbox, PlayStation, screen, whatever, for so long, and I knew you guys didn't allow any electronics. That's why my kid is here. And I was just like, that's good. That's good stuff. That's what I want to hear. That's what I like to hear, because camp really should be a place where we retreat from that stuff. Now, here's something else that I believe. We need to be a facility that shows kids how to steward these things, not just stay away from these things, right? Because as someone who teaches, someone who disciples, someone who parents, you can have a list of rules in the home, in the church, in a place where you teach or disciple. All they will ever be are rules unless you can teach them how to properly steward something. And so maybe in the next year or two, once we actually formulate a plan, we may say to our high schoolers, bring your phones, but we're going to have some challenges. We're going to do some things to show you this is how you manage your device. This is healthier living with social media platforms, because there's really no convincing a lot of people, hey, delete your social media. Well, I just use it, man. I just can't because I've got so many people to keep up with. Okay. Well, I just can't because if I did that, then my business my business profile is tied into my Facebook. So you can't, there's a lot of places you can't really delete social media nowadays because of so many different ties to it. So how do we manage it? How do we become good stewards of what we're doing? Simple thing, I initiated this on myself. No one came up to me, smacked me in the back of the head and said, you need to do this. I just decided to do it myself because I've noticed the effects of social media and phones and devices in my life. I've put a timer on my own phone that only a couple people know the password to. So I only get, all day, I only get 25 minutes of any social media. That's it. That's it. I looked back on my average about a year ago. My average of social media time a day was 2.5 hours. You think that's something? When I was in youth ministry, we went to Tennessee Christian Teen Convention, which a lot of people are familiar with here. It was Wilderness. It was 2019. It was called Wilderness. That was the theme. It was about escaping, right? We had a session. I had about 40 or 50 students with me. We broke up into teams. I had a session with my kids or with my team. I asked them, just want everyone to get on your phone right now. I want you to tell me, what is your average reporting amount of time that you spent on your phone a day? 4 hours. 3 hours, 5 hours. One kid raised his head and said 8.5 hours. 8.5 hours. You have to be kidding me. I said, what do you do? He said, well, I've got my game on my phone. I've got my friends and social media on my phone. My parents want to keep up with me on my phone. Everything about it, all relationships start like this for him. I guarantee it. Like all of his conversations, everything that he does is just like this. And I told all of them, I said, listen, it is actually, I had your parents sign this. Do not use your phone while someone is speaking to you or you're listening to someone during one of the main sessions. Do not be opening your phone, looking at your phone, whatever. Just stay away from it. Be respectful of people when they're trying to teach you something or they're talking to you. And I said, I put it in my disclaimer, I have the right to confiscate your child's phone, and you are releasing me those rights. Parents signing away on it, right? That same kid, 8.5 hours on his screen, he would not put it down while the person was speaking. And I asked him, I said, why are you doing this? He said, I listen better this way. I'm like, no, you don't. I guarantee it, you don't. I said, do you listen better to me when you're looking at your phone? You're looking at me like eye to eye right now. He said, well, in my classroom, they allow us to be on our phones during some of these things because we actually are, it's such a hypersensitive world we live in, we actually listen better while we're on our devices. Can you believe that? And I asked some of those other kids, they were like, oh yeah, we can be on our phones because, and the excuse is because it's such a hypersensitive world. Kids will watch YouTube while having music playing, while trying to learn something. Why? Because it is a hypersensitive world. Is that the right solution? Is just to say, well, now that we're in this hypersensitive world, continue to listen to this thing while you do this subject. Or listen to this person. I don't think so. I think it's trying to figure out how to better steward those devices, the time that you spend on those devices, whatever it is. So how does that relate to camp? In a lot of ways, okay? I think camp can be a place where we teach kids to retreat from those things, that it is healthy to retreat, to back away from those devices, whatever it is, social media platforms, all of that. It's also a place where we can teach them to steward some of those items. We challenge, and I'm just using this one subject, okay, because we don't have a lot of time to go through all the different things that we do at camp. Obviously, we teach the Bible at camp. But we also teach what does it look like to be a Christian in today's world. Spiritual disciplines are important, correct? Right? We learned that in Scripture. Jesus practiced spiritual disciplines. A lot of his disciples, his apostles, practiced spiritual disciplines. Those spiritual disciplines can be applied today, but it just looks a little different in some aspects, like the use of your phone. So not only do we teach kids and hope to save the lost and be a light in our community, but we're also trying to disciple them to be Christians in today's world. And so that is a lot of what Camp Pitt, to me, is about, and some of the challenges that we face. How much time do we have? Well, we're 36 minutes into this. We're doing all right. How long do you guys usually go? It's about 2 hours, right? Yeah? 2 hours?
12 more.
12 more minutes a gig. Okay. All right. Well, okay. So for 12 more minutes, what I'd like to talk about is some of the needs of camp. Okay. So there's just a snapshot of some of the challenges. There's a snapshot of what do we try to accomplish at camp while we have kids there? Why are they there? Why do we want them to be at camp? Because again, the camp environment seems like it's an outdated thing, right? It almost seems, at least in my world, it's just like, if I was a parent right now, I'd kind of question, the first question that comes across my mind is, are my kids going to be enthused or excited about going to camp? My answer to that is no. It's probably not. And a lot of parents, I tell them that. Are they going to be really excited to go to camp? Probably not. And I told two parents that this summer. Two parents came up to me this summer and said, hey, my kid just doesn't want to come home, so they're just not going to. And I'm like, who's the parent? I mean, and I tried to convince them, like, this is why your child needs. I said, what does your child do? You know, while they're home, well, they usually get on their Xbox. They play Minecraft. I'm like, how often do they go outside? How often are they socializing with actual people? We live, this is another thing I would love to talk about, it would take too long, but we live in a relational, deprived society. And I'm like, how often do they get to spend time with real friends? They're like, oh, well, there is a friend that comes over. The reason why I'm uncomfortable with using this conversation with you all, because it's a conversation that I have with family members. Well, we have such and such girl that comes down the road. She comes over and they play together. I'm like, okay, what do? They get on the Xbox and play Minecraft. We live in such a relationally deprived world. We really do. And I said, let me just say this based on experience. I told my relative this. Let me just say this based on experience. If you send your child and her friend within 3 or 4 days, they are going to not want to leave. And that was spot on. Let me tell you, I got goosebumps. I was super excited. I need to be Christian about it. I didn't rub her in her face, you know. I was like, I told you. But I just kind of stood there, and I was just like, it speaks for itself. The kids really enjoyed this because they were pushed out of their comfort zone. Their comfort zone was in the basement on the Xbox. They were pushed out of their comfort zone and forced to be around other kids where they made friends. They built relationships. They learned about Jesus. They got away from their normal way of life where it's just all sensory overload from social media, whatever, these different platforms that are just trying to grab their attention all the time. And they got to a safe haven called Camp Pitt. That is what I'm excited about. That's what I like. So anyway, what does Camp Pitt need right now? Camp Pitt needs your prayers all the time. Make it a commitment today if you can. If you don't have a prayer journal or a list for yourself, you've got your phone. Here's a good way to steward your phone. Go into notes on your phone, create a prayer list. That's a good one, right? Make a list or just do something that reminds you of Camp Pitt. I always use some kind of an object when I need to remind myself to pray for someone. I started that when, as I came to you, my youth ministry professor is a biker, okay? He's one of the lead elders for Bikers for Christ. He said, he came to Christ one day, and he said, one of our members, what's his name? Spoke, I think? Will Spoke. I don't know what kind of name is that, but they give each other nicknames in Bikers for Christ. But he said, one of our members, Will Spoke, was in a bad accident. If you will pray for him, that would be great. Every time you see a biker drive down the road, remember to pray for him. And so I always try to use some kind of an object to try to remember to pray for someone. Anytime you see a church as you're driving, pray for Ray as he leads this church. You know, anytime that you see, how about this? Anytime you see a tree today, why don't you pray for Camp Pitt? Oh, yeah, it's too many trees, right? Do something to remember us in your prayers, because we have a lot of work to do. I may be out. So, someone asked me this morning, don't you get lonely out there? Yeah. Don't you get lonely out there in the middle of nowhere where, you're just at Camp Pitt by yourself? Not really, I enjoy my privacy. But where we're out in the country, where we're a ministry that's open just, a couple months out of the year, sometimes we're either thrown on the back burners and kind of forgotten about. Don't forget about us, because year-round we're planning stuff, we're trying to think through things, strategizing how we can minister to this generation. There's a lot that happens here. We got fundraiser coming up next Sunday for camp. That's another way that you can help us out. So you can actually give to camp via check every single month if you want to, or participate in our Harvest Day, which will be next Sunday from 3 to 5. You can also, we have an online giving site through Tidely. You can join that, and we can set it up to where it automatically retrieves $5, $10, however much you want on there, retrieve it from your bank account via debit card or credit card or whatever you prefer. It'll give you an option to sink your check into it. So these are ways that you can help us out if you want to. Another thing that we desperately need, we always need volunteers. And I was going to talk to the board about this in our next board meeting, but I did kind of a little bit of an informal questionnaire with volunteers this year. I asked a lot of people who were considering volunteering at camp, and some that did. Was there anything that made you hesitate in volunteering for camp? And they said lack of training. I want to make sure, probably in February, March, that we provide at least 2 or 3 sessions available, maybe on 2 or 3 Saturdays in a row, for volunteer training. Even if you can't commit, you're like, man, I don't know if I want to come to camp this summer, I can't commit to these dates, still come to those volunteer trainings so that you can learn how to better serve the church. Because Camp Pitt is partnered with over 20 churches in our area, in our region, right? And so churches give to us, we need to give back to the church. And that's one way that we can do that. How can we not just train volunteers for what we're doing here at the ministry of Camp Pitt, but how can they take that back and use it at their church? Be excited to use that at their church. And honestly, you listen about some of the things that I'm talking about today, this generation, I get it. I get how a lot of people can be intimidated at knowing how on earth do I be a part and volunteer? How on earth do I do that and be effective with this generation? It's intimidating. And so I want to make sure that we provide that training. If you're interested in being a volunteer for camp, provide that training for you, sign up. One of the biggest reasons why this was just, God led us through a great year of camp, really. There are a lot of situations. It could have been a whole lot worse, and it has been for a lot of people, for a lot of organizations, for a lot of businesses. For camp, we did well. We did really well. One of the things that I kept thinking about as we were coming up to the summer, oh man, we're worrying about COVID. We're worrying about money. We're worrying about just all these different things that eventually we learned we didn't need to worry about because God took care of it. And He took care of this too, but the biggest thing I was concerned about, aside from COVID, aside from money, aside from registrations, was volunteers. I kept looking at our volunteer numbers and comparing it to all my other worries, and I was just like, wait a minute. We're good on registrations. We're good on money. We're good with COVID stuff right now. We only had 1 case per week in our county when we started camp. The VDH dropped a lot of their, here's what you have to do. I'm like, we're good to have camp. But we still need volunteers, and we might not be able to do this without volunteers. Isn't that crazy? We had so many other things to worry about this summer, but volunteers was probably the number one that I was probably most worried about. And I don't say that to guilt anybody. I say that to just show you the need that we have. You can't know how to provide for something if you don't know the true need, right? And so please be either consider volunteering for us in the future or be praying about people that will be motivated to volunteer at Camp Pitt, to come to our camp, to be trained, and to disciple our young people. So that's all I have for Camp Pitt. And then here in a little bit, we're going to get into the Word of God. So excited about that. All right.
Hey, Austin.
Hey.
How about a cross? Every time we see a cross today.
Every time you see a cross today, that sounds amazing.
I think of the cross across the
Yeah. If you've never been to camp, which I'll show a video here in a little bit. You come down the main driveway, you look across our pond, there's a white cross just right up on the hill. You can't miss it. It's beautiful. Hey, buddy.
Okay. Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, if we have a couple more minutes.
Yeah, we got a couple minutes. If you might have a question.
Do a quick Q&A.
I don't have a question, I have a comment talking about your volunteers. I remember years ago when I first started volunteering at camp, I was the youngest of the adult staff.
Yeah?
This year,
How you feel?
I was the oldest.
Hey, but you were there.
But let me tell you,
Right.
my team won first place. Parker was on my team, so
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't doing it boasting or nothing, but I felt so good for that team and it was through their memory work that they did. And my kids always say, well, you always got a song for everything. So I was making up songs and stuff, or coming up, the old songs and things, and they look at me kind of funny, but then all of a sudden, it caught on with them, and they started, doing. And then I got put in Motel 6, I called it, because I was in the dorm, and one of the moms came, because her little girl, she didn't think would stay at camp without her, and I said, she went to the Holiday Inn over with the JC staff, and I got stuck in Motel 6, but it was okay.
And I wasn't there that week, but I went a lot of days. And what I noticed about that, and you may want to remember this is the first time I can ever remember asking kids what was their favorite part of camp, and they answered memory work.
Yeah. Cool.
But a lot of emphasis is put on memory work in camp and learning the Bible. That's the big emphasis. And all these other things, and fun and all that's a big part of it. But it's getting to know Jesus and getting to know your Bible. That's what it's all about. All right. So, just so Austin knows, how many people in this room have ever volunteered for camp? All right. How many people in this room have attended camp? Camp Pitt. All right. So our folks are familiar with camp.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
All right. So if you have no other questions, we'll take a quick break and get ready for the morning worship time. If you have some questions you want to ask Austin, do that. If you want to come up to the table and look at the different mission points that we support with our Faith Promise program, you can Chad, would you lead us in prayer,
Yes.
please?
Father God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for the chance to come and spotlight one of our ministries that we support through our missions work. And, as we focus on Camp Pitt today and how it has served us and how it's changed lives, God, I pray that we also use the time of fellowship and be in your word. Bless the time of worship we have coming up next hour. In Jesus' name we pray.
Yeah.